Thanks.
Time as any, Mr. Newman. Take her down to periscope depth.
Yes, sir. Clear the bridge. Dive.
Stand right.
Welcome to Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith YouTube channel. I'm Salvador Cordova, and in today's segment, I'm going to do the first in a ongoing series of shows that I'll entitle Nerds Go Clubbing. Now, the thumbnail that was associated with this video is a Las Vegas nightclub, and there is the nightclub there. I personally am not into the nightclubbing scene at all. However, this nightclub is in one of my two favorite casinos in Las Vegas, the Bellagio. The other being my other favorite casino being the Venetian. The Venetian and the Bellagio are just very elegant places. The architecture and ambiance are very heartwarming to behold. It's like an oasis in a sea of degeneracy and debauchery. And then you walk into some of these isolated places in these casinos, and you think you're at a beautiful, calm resort. There's often classical music playing in the background, just very elegant. And even though I had done briefly professional level gambling, I really don't like the gambling environment, just kind of the stupidity and silliness and drunkenness that goes on, and superstition and just kind of dumb reasoning that finances the casinos. But places like this at the Bellagio and at the Venetian kind of just put my mind at ease when we see something beautiful. And so anyway, that's not really the point of today. I just used the idea of clubbing to introduce these topics. In the world of science, they have things called journal clubs. A journal club is often just an informal gathering where scientists will take a paper and just read through it, sometimes from end to end, and just discuss it. Many times a journal article that is current is not necessarily the easiest read. I've heard stories where scientists trying to read through a scientific article might have to take 2 days to kind of digest what is being said. And one way that we grow as researchers is to actually read journals and articles that we don't completely understand. The areas that we are not able to comprehend usually points us to perhaps areas that we might consider doing further study of. Now, there are only so many hours in the day and so many days in a person's life, and one has to be judicious as to what sort of things they're going to study. So today's topic in Nerds Go Clubbing for our little journal club is this article by Luke Barnes. Luke Barnes, the name Luke Barnes came up in my debate with TJump recently. And TJump was saying he was asserting that naturalism explains everything, including fine-tuning, and that TJump interviewed Luke Barnes. So I don't know what TJump was trying to imply by that, saying, oh yeah, he heard Luke Barnes, but he doesn't believe him, or he heard Luke Barnes, and Luke Barnes agrees with him. So I'm going to try to clarify what Luke Barnes actually said, and those who watch the debate can compare it with what TJump said. Ultimately, what TJump said, and even what I say, is beside the point. It's what the facts say. Opinions may be interesting, but facts carry the day. So, let me say a little bit about who Luke Barnes is. Luke Barnes is, to the best of my knowledge, a professing Christian. He is a physicist and cosmologist at the Western Sydney University School of Science. He's very, very, very smart. He wrote in this year, 2020, in an open access journal of philosophy, an article entitled A Reasonable Little Question, a formulation of the fine-tuning argument. And the question he asks, I have to scroll down to show it. The question Luke asks is on page 1229. And yes, I'm going to try to go through a lot of this. It's going to be tedious, but this is the way we learn. This is how we get more convinced of the facts. And the little question is, of all the possible ways that the fundamental constants of the Standard Model could have been, is our universe what we would expect on naturalism? Is our universe what we would expect of naturalism? Now, TJump will say, yes, it is. This is the universe we would expect on naturalism. But how does Luke Barnes, whom TJump interviewed, how does Luke Barnes answer this question? What conclusions did Luke Barnes arrive at? And it is at the conclusion here. This is, my goodness, this is a very lengthy paper. And just going through all this, I doubt that I could get through all of this in one sitting. So, but to cut to the chase, in short, the answer to the little question is no. In short, the answer to the little question is no. That means the universe we live in is not what is expected of naturalism. And so, whatever TJump said, and whatever his claims are, Luke Barnes, who is a professional physicist and cosmologist, says no. He disagrees with what TJump said. Now, TJump will keep pointing to the consensus and all, but, you know, this is just me. Each person has to decide for themselves what are the facts. We are all confronted with decisions with incomplete knowledge. And you can look at the wonder of the universe and decide for yourself whether you think this is the product of something natural or intelligently designed. So let's just try to go through this paper. whatever we could fit in, say, an hour's time. And if we're not able to get through all of it, we'll just say that for another segment. But this is an important enough topic. Now, I know it's very natural for each of us to want not to think hard, to be entertained, and I definitely succumb to that. But to dig up evidence and reasons for the Christian faith, it takes work. Jesus said the work of God is to believe in Him. That means this is not going to be easy to build your faith. You can't just force yourself to say, "Oh, I want to believe this, therefore I'll believe it." That usually doesn't work. The way our faith is built is, as Jesus said, consider the works. Consider the works. Consider the works. And now, if I could be a little bit critical, or maybe pretty harshly critical, of what I see going on in evangelical Christianity, it seems that the way their attempt to build faith is just to preach at you. And some preachers just scream at you. And I'm just like, well, okay, does that really make you believe? Is that what Jesus said? Did He say just go somewhere and have someone scream at you all day and just preach at you all day? He said, study the works. John 10:38. Study the works. Consider the works so that you may believe. So that's what we're going to do today. It's not going to be fun. All right, this is like exercise. This is tough medicine to take. But may the Lord give us all the strength to bear our cross as we try to slug through this. So let's go through it as much as we can, as much as feasible, line by line. This is from the Ergo, an open access journal of philosophy. Open access means that it's free. It's not behind a paywall. The idea is that the article is freely distributed. So let me now try to just page through it. The abstract reads, a new formulation of the fine-tuning argument, FTA, for the existence of God is offered, which avoids a number of commonly raised objections. I argue that we can and should focus on the fundamental constants and the initial conditions of the universe, and show how physics itself provides the probabilities that are needed by the argument. I explain how this formulation avoids a number of common objections, specifically the possibility of deeper physical laws, the multiverse, normalizability, whether God would fine-tune at all, whether the universe is too fine-tuned, and whether the likelihood of God creating a life-permitting universe is inscrutable. Is the physical world all that exists? Are the ultimate laws of the physical universe the end of all explanations? Or is there something about our universe that is noteworthy or rare or clever or unexpected? The fine-tuning argument for the existence of God puts forward just such a fact. The claim is that the existence of a universe that supports the complexity required by physical life forms is remarkable. To be sure, it is a familiar fact. After all, we exist. But new information has seemingly made this familiar fact into an astounding one. In the set of fundamental parameters, constants and initial conditions of nature, such as the cosmological constant and the strength of electromagnetism, an extraordinarily small subset would have resulted in a universe able to support the complexity required by life. This is known as the fine-tuning of the universe for life. Now, if I may interject here, just to give a little break from the paper, and then also, this is purely my opinion. People will say, well, what's life? Let me define it this way. The important question is a life that is capable of doing science. All right, we could have a universe where we just have dumb bacteria that don't care about larger questions, such as the ones that humans think about. So let's talk about a universe that allows the sort of life where science can succeed and where individual creatures with minds can ask and explore questions that are of ultimate significance and questions that are far greater than themselves and far greater than everyday survival. So let's just go on. The FTA claims, FTA being the fine-tuning argument, the FTA claims that given the fine-tuning of the universe, the existence of a life-permitting universe is very unexpected given naturalism. That, quote, there is only one world, the natural world, which evolves according to unbroken patterns, the laws of nature, end quote. That's Sean Carroll. But not particularly unexpected given theism, that God exists. All right, so he quotes Sean Carroll, who says there's only one world, the natural world, and Luke Barnes is contesting that. He said let me just try to get this straight because I may have misread that. Apologies to our viewers. Okay, I think I understand this. This is why Journal Club is really helpful. We try to understand what the author is saying. So the fine-tuning argument claims, given the fine-tuning of the universe, the existence of a life-permitting universe is very unexpected given naturalism. So if we assume naturalism, the universe we live in is unexpected. So now let me weigh in a little bit on the word unexpected. In mathematics, we have things like the law of large numbers. So if we have 1,000,000 fair coins or 500 fair coins, the law of large numbers says that if we just took all those fair coins and flipped them, it is expected that about 50%, give or take a few standard deviations from the mean, about 50% will be heads, the other and the rest tails. What is not expected is that they're going to be all tails or all heads. So there is a mathematical notion of what expected means. Expected means we have that in the law of large numbers, and then also into this question of fine-tuning. So what Luke Barnes is trying to articulate is, given naturalism, the universe we live in is very unexpected. And he quotes Carroll, which that confused me a little bit. But if one believes in God who can design, it is not particularly unexpected, given theism, that God exists. It thus provides evidence for the existence of God. It is worth remembering, before we consider the range of philosophical formulations and responses, that the argument has considerable intuitive force. Faced with his own fine-tuning discoveries in physics and astronomy, Fred Hoyle commented that, quote, a common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as with chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature, end quote. Hoyle in 1982. For what it's worth, Fred Hoyle described himself as an atheist or agnostic. I'm not going to be really particular about there are some distinctions between them. So he's not at all a creationist or definitely not a Christian. But I think Hoyle was confronted with the facts. Now, Hoyle came up with a different theory that maybe the universe just kind of created itself and is intelligent on the whole. All right, so, but still, this should be kind of alarming and something that stands out, that Hoyle would say, it's worth reading the quote again, a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as with chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. Philosophers of religion have formulated the FTA in a number of ways. Swinburne presents the FTA as a, quote, see inductive, end quote, argument. that is, an argument that adds to the probability of the conclusion. Swinburne argues that the probability that human bodies exist, given that the universe conforms to natural laws, is very low if theism is false, and not very low if theism is true. In a similar vein, Collins argues that given the fine-tuning evidence, a life-permitting universe is very, very epistemically unlikely. A life-permitting universe is very, very epistemically unlikely under the hypothesis that there is a single naturalistic universe, but not unlikely under theism. Given that theism was advocated prior to the fine-tuning evidence and has independent motivation, it follows that the existence of a life-permitting universe strongly supports theism over the naturalistic single universe hypothesis. I will discuss multiple naturalistic universes in a later section. Roberts, 2011, motivated by the problem of old evidence, formulates the argument with the existence of a life-permitting universe as background evidence and the fine-tuning of the universe for life as new evidence on which we update our credences. Craig presents the FTA as a syllogism. 1. The fine-tuning of the initial state of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. 2. It is not due to physical necessity or chance. 3. Therefore, it is due to design. Physical necessity is discounted because of the existence of alternative mathematical laws of nature and the non-uniqueness of initial conditions in all physical laws. Chance is discounted because the probabilities involved are extremely small and the universe conforms to an independent pattern. It is life permitting. So, now let me back up a little bit. How does that compare to what TJump asserted in the debate? And I didn't call him on it in the debate, in the middle of the debate. It's really hard to just call someone out. You'd have to gamble, and I wasn't willing to do that, to just call someone out and say, you're dead wrong. I wasn't going to do that. I was going to come back and revisit this and methodically take what he said apart. So I hope that when he claims that he interviewed Luke Barnes and then he could just, with a straight face, say naturalism explains everything, I have a problem with that, and I'm calling TJump out on it. I'm doing it now, and I'm mad at myself that I didn't call him out during the debate. I was Mr. Nice Guy, partly because, as a skilled gambler, you don't take risks that are unneeded. I knew that after that debate, and after everyone's forgotten it, I could go back. I could go back and survey the literature and comb through this question methodically, because that's what really counts. People who are part of this channel, and I thank everyone who's a viewer here and who's coming to see this. This is my chance to comb through the evidence with you, and you could see it right here. It doesn't matter what people just kind of say flippantly and casually in a debate. What matters is the facts, and there you have it right here. This is a real problem. I knew that when I just recall when I was at University of Virginia, just not as a student, I was visiting there, and we were talking about the fine-tuning of the universe. Actually, the video called Privileged Planet by Guillermo Gonzalez and Jay Richards, the Intelligent Design Club there, in around the 2005 time frame, was hosting a showing of Privileged Planet. And I remember one of the atheist professors, he's a physicist, astronomer, he gave this, we were just talking casually in the hallway, and he said, yeah, the fine-tuning problem is a real problem. And you should have seen the look on his face. It's like, you mean you're really distressed by fine-tuning? That really bothered? I was just thinking to myself as I saw the look on his face, you mean it really bothers you that the universe is fine-tuned? Like, it's a problem that actually needs to be solved in terms of naturalism? I mean, wouldn't you be excited? And it was the most troubling look. He said he just kind of shook his head and didn't know. He seemed like he was like bewildered. That's the look. He looked bewildered and troubled. He said fine-tuning is a problem. So, back to Luke Barnes's paper. Unsurprisingly, a wide range of objections have been raised against the FTA. We will discuss the following objections in later sections. A. Deeper laws. The constants and initial conditions simply reflect the unfinished state of current physics. Physics will progress until we find, in the words of Einstein, such strongly determined laws that within these laws only rationally, completely determined constants occur, not constants, therefore, whose numerical value could be changed without destroying the theory. The multiverse. B. It is physically possible, or more strongly, reasonable extensions to the current physical theories make it plausible that the constants and initial conditions that characterize our observable universe vary through time and space, effectively creating a vast number of variegated universe domains within this multiverse. See, I'm learning new words. Variegated. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Creating a vast number of variegated universe domains. Within this multiverse, the right conditions for life are likely to turn up somewhere, and of course, life will only exist to ask questions in the very rare life-permitting universe domains. C. Normalizability. McGrew et al. And Koilevan et al. Have argued that probability measure that the FTA attempts to apply to the constants and initial conditions of nature, because it is spread evenly over an infinitely large range, cannot be normalized, and hence the relevant probabilities cannot be calculated. We cannot conclude that a life-permitting universe is improbable on naturalism. Objection D. God wouldn't fine-tune. A number of authors have questioned why God would create a universe that needed to be fine-tuned in the first place. Why create this hurdle only to then overcome it? Why not simply make a universe in which life is a likely outcome, regardless of the fundamental parameters? Why doesn't God use his power to make life in any universe? Okay. Objection E to fine-tuning argument. Too fine-tuned. There are characteristics of our universe that are too fine-tuned, in the sense that our universe is significantly less likely than life requires. This amounts to a failed prediction for theism, or an opportunity for another ad hoc theist dodge. Objection F. The inscrutable God. Manson has defended the objection that the probability of a life-permitting universe on theism is inscrutable, that we cannot make an estimate of it. The skeptic of fine-tuning reasons that God's mind is so different from ours that we cannot judge what God would be likely to create, or even whether God would be likely to create at all. In this paper, I present a formulation of the FTA that answers these objections in a new way. Section 2 will review Bayesian probability theory, on which my formulation will be based. Section 3 will present and defend the premises of this argument. Section 4 will reply to objections. So I could see now that we're coming up on about half an hour, and goodness, I think I'm only 5% through the paper. But let me offer a few thoughts here. This is for those of you who are thoughtful people and wanting to really strengthen your convictions one way or the other. This is kind of a necessary thing to do, is to read journals like this, read technical materials, not just isolated quotes, but to actually go through the reasoning. And so with that in mind, perhaps I'll just go through one more section, and just so that we don't wear our minds out, I will continue with this paper by Luke Barnes in another segment. So let's just let me look at Let me just look how long this segment is and see how far we could go through it. Okay. As I said, going through a peer-reviewed paper often means we start to engage things we don't completely understand. And I may have to actually appeal to Wikipedia a little bit. And because Luke is using some notations that I've seen before, but in the interest of being thorough, I want to make sure I'm describing the symbols correctly. So let's just go through this methodically, and when I get stuck, I'm going to just have to pause and say, let me look this up on Wikipedia. So, section 2, testing theories, the Bayesian way. There are some subtle differences between the way physicists and philosophers use the Bayesian approach to probability theory that are important to our presentation of the FTA. I have discussed the Bayesian approach to reasoning in the physical sciences elsewhere and will summarize the important points here. Bayesian probabilities, P, the probability of A given B. So let me make sure I'm saying this right. I think that is a conditional probability statement. Let me just look here just to be sure. That wiki entry didn't help. Let's see. I'm going to look up conditional probabilities. If I say something that's incorrect, please in the video comment section provide a correction, and I'd be deeply appreciative. So let me just make sure I'm reading this notation correctly. Yes, the formula for conditional probability is P given A, which means that if condition B is satisfied, what is the probability of A being true? And so I'm not going to belabor this. We might have to go to some math books to really flesh this out. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to go through the paper as is. For those that want to pursue conditional probabilities, that's all well and fine. And it'd be probably a great learning experience for me too to review this. I had probability and statistics, and I certainly used some of this in gambling math. Thankfully, I didn't have to do all the math from scratch. Someone else did the calculations for me. That's why I got away without having to actually do this myself. But anyway, Bayesian probabilities, P, the probability of A given B, are developed, for example, by Jaynes as an extension to classical logic, quantifying the degree of plausibility of the proposition A given the truth of proposition B, or following Kleiman-Haga, we can speak of the degree of support that B gives to A. Why think that degrees of plausibility or support can be mathematically modeled by probabilities? There are a number of approaches that lead Bayesians to the probability axioms of Kolmogorov or similar, such as Dutch book arguments and representational theorems that trace back to Ramsey. Better known among physicists is the theorem of Cox, which show that the standard probability rules follow from some simple desiderata. I learned another word, desiderata, such as, quote, if a conclusion can be reasoned out in more than one way, then every possible way must lead to the same result. If a conclusion can be reasoned out in more than one way, then every possible way must lead to the same result. These give the usual product, sum, and negotiation rules for each of the Boolean operators and AB, or A plus B, and not, A naught. From the product rule, we can derive Bayes' theorem, assuming that the probability of B given C is non-zero. Okay, so that's how I'm reading this. And there is the mathematical formulation. So it says the probability of A given B and C is equal to the probability of B given A and C times the probability of A given C divided by that entire numerator divided by probability of B given C. Yes, the math. All right, this is not going to be easy. But anyway, these are identities holding for any propositions A, B, and C for which the relevant quantities are defined. In philosophical presentations, Bayes' theorem often comes attached to a narrative about prior beliefs, updating and conditioning. None of this is essential. Assigning known propositions to B and C in equation 1 is purely for convenience. This is worth stressing. There is nothing in the foundations of Bayesian probability theory or in its actual use in the physical sciences that mandates we apply Bayes' theorem in chronological order. That is, that applying equation 1, we must have learned B after we learn C. This chronological mandate is often imposed by philosophers. I have never seen it imposed by scientists or statisticians. When Bayes' theorem is used to calculate the probability of some hypothesis or theory T, given evidence E and background information B, then the corresponding terms in equation 1 are labeled as follows. Probability T given E and B is the posterior probability P, the probability T given B is the prior probability. E given T and B is the likelihood, and P given B is the marginal likelihood. But remember, these are mere labels. Let me pause here. When I studied this sort of math, now I just blasted through this, just reading it. This could take half a day trying to uncoil the meaning of all this. I'm not kidding. This is not easy stuff. We could just read this and just roll our eyes and say, well, get to the point. But that is the point. And it's not easy to be thinking on these things. So perhaps the only service that I could give at this point is just to acquaint you that these topics are being raised. I wanted to point out that my main thing is saying what TJump said in his debate that naturalism is proven. He didn't go through any methodical analysis like you're getting right here. For him to make those assertions, he really has to, to do it in a way with intellectual integrity. He has to slug through this like we're slugging through it, rather than just appealing to consensus. This is reasons and evidence for believing in the Christian faith. If we're just going to appeal to consensus without going through the literature or just maybe quoting a piece here or there, that's not being very methodical. And granted, and I totally respect, we all have certain hours limited to devote our lives to study of these difficult topics. But let me just say, okay, if you don't understand everything, at least you're hearing someone argue his case very, very well and methodically. And at some time in the future, if you do have time to consider these things, all the better. But you can actually, what I've just tried to say in the short span of what we're doing today is nothing that TJump said agrees with what Luke Barnes is saying. And Luke Barnes is a professional cosmologist. So yeah, TJump is just making statements that I don't think are really, really well thought out. And it's just, There are people like that don't really think through their position as methodically and carefully as Luke Barnes, and they'll just keep asserting it and preaching it. And sadly, I meet people on both sides of the discussion who are just that they'll just say what they believe, and they're not really able to justify it in terms of methodical thinking, like Luke is obviously doing here. So anyway, let me see how much more we have in the section 2. And if it's going to be more, because this is really thick, really thick reading, I might just stop it there. Okay, we're almost done. Oh my goodness, we're almost done. So I'm just going to read the footnotes just to be complete. Okay, this is what journal clubbing is like. Journal clubbing is not for the faint of heart. But if one wants to elevate the discussion to the professional level, this is what has to be done. So, let's see. There are these little footnotes here. Let's just read the footnotes. 1. As our presentation of Bayesian probability is somewhat different to the usual philosophical presentation, I've used the notation most familiar to physicists. That's helpful. Kleiman-Haga, footnote 2, Kleiman-Haga, 2019, argues that the correct situation in which to apply equation 1 is when A is explanatorily prior to B. Dropping the chronological mandate avoids the problem of old evidence. Glymore, 1980, argues that if we already know evidence E, then the probability of E given T equals 1 and the probability of E equals 1, and thus the probability of T given E equals the probability of T, as discussed in Barnes, As discussed in Barnes 2018, this is not how to use Bayes' theorem. Even if E is known, it is not taken as a given in every probability we calculate. Every likelihood is the probability of some fact that we already know. Calculating the likelihood uses the same probability function that comes from Cox's theorem. It does not require a new unprobability function, generated by supposing that one does not fully believe that that one does not fully believe that E. Boy, this is hard reading. Bayesian degrees of plausibility support aren't about what any individual knows or believes. They are about what one proposition implies about the plausibility of another. Regarding the FTA, there is no need to argue in chronological order, taking life as background information and fine-tuning as new information. Okay, so I totally butchered some of the reading of that. Apologies to the viewers. I do have a little bit of stutter and a reading disability. And doing this journal clubbing is one way for me to overcome my stuttering and my dyslexia and my reading disabilities. And hopefully it's a service to the viewers. So we're almost done with this section, and then I'm going to close the today's segment. Page 1224. Our argument will focus on likelihoods. We can write Bayes' theorem in the following form, and I'm not going to read that. Oh my goodness. I could try, but it's not going to help. Okay, just suffice that that's equation 2. Note 2 important points. Firstly, all theory testing is theory comparison. In equation 2, we must evaluate the term probability E given T naught and B, which is the likelihood of the evidence given that the theory T is not true. We must compare the expectations of our theory of interest with the expectation of rival theories considered together as T naught. Now, I'm going to just pause a little bit. Because I've read enough papers like this, you're just like, what's the point? What's the point? Can't you just get to the point? This is a math-heavy paper already, and statistics. What Luke is doing is just setting out the formalisms in terms of what are accepted ways of estimating probability in the physical science. He's just referencing this and justifying it. So he tried to justify the use of this formula. So just take it for what it's worth. This is going to be a very interesting argument, how people can argue whether this formula that Luke is showing, that Luke Barnes is showing, is something that's a valid premise. And so we'll just leave it at that. This is complicated math. And it's like, well, can you just get to the point? And it's like, well, this is the point. This is the point. This is setting up the foundation. Now, I will tell you this, and I was really irritated. Bro, I was on S.J. Thomason's show, and I was just trying to explain something to him. He said, you're dodging, you're avoiding, you're being verbose. I said, I really resented that when I was trying to explain a point and respond to his point. And he interrupted me midway, and I said, I'm not going to talk. If you're going to interrupt me when I'm trying to explain something, what's the point? If you're just going to disrupt and interrupt, what's the point of me trying to explain anything? And what I did is I said, my mic's off. If you want to hear my answer, you'll stop interrupting me. He stopped interrupting me. And he said I was being disingenuous. He was basically accusing me of lying, which I take serious exception to. I may be verbose. I may not. It may be that I don't explain things well. Or maybe it's too over his head to comprehend what I was trying to tell him. But I take serious exception when someone says, oh, you're being so verbose, therefore you're disingenuous. So, sorry, I just had to blow a little bit of steam off, because this is not easy stuff. And to get through it, it's helpful to be methodical. And I have a great deal of respect for Luke Barnes here. So let's continue on. So note two important points. Firstly, all theory testing is theory comparison. In equation 2, we must evaluate the term probability of E given not B. E given not T and B, which is the likelihood of the evidence given that the theory T is not true. We must compare the expectations of our theory of interest with the expectation of rival theories considered together as not T. So I can already see, I can kind of intuitively say I know where he's coming from. If we postulate theories, just like the theory of the law of large numbers, and we can have systems where the law of large numbers applies, and we have expectation values of how this will play out. So we can just postulate theories and say, what's the expectation values? This is just standard stuff. And all Luke is doing, I can just see him setting this up. What are the expectation values? What are the expected outcomes of all these theories? And let's see which theory. We now compare the theories based on expectation, and the theory where the evidence violates expectation is less likely to be true. It's very simple. This is just maybe a more rigorous way of comparing theories. I'll give you, again, going back to the law of large numbers. If we have 500 fair coins, and I insist that they are fair, and you see them on a floor, and they're all heads, that violates the expectation that this was through a random process, that they are all heads. And it's really funny. I have a recorded anecdote where I challenged an evolutionary biologist by the name of Nick Matsky on that very problem. I asked Barry Arrington, who runs the Uncommon Descent website, to challenge Nick Matsky and say, okay, if you came across a table that had 500 fair coins, all heads, he asked Nick Matsky, do you believe that this could come about through a random process? And Nick punted. He couldn't answer a simple no. He was troubled by that. So when we start to deal with expectation values, this starts to get serious now, what you really believe. Because you're going to compare your theory, you're going to compare the expectation of your theory against what actually came out, the evidence we have in hand. So it's very similar to this question of, okay, if you came across a table that's 500 coins heads, and you're postulating it came out through a random process, and then you find out this is so far from what's expected, you have more reason to reject random processes as an explanation. So let's try to wrap this up, today's segment. Secondly, theories are rewarded according to how likely they make evidence. Likelihoods are normalized with respect to evidence. The probability of E given T and B plus the probability of not E given T and B equals 1. A theory is given 1 unit of probability to spend among the possible sets of evidence and must choose wisely where to place its bets. A prodigal theory that squanders its likelihood on evidence that isn't observed by spreading it thinly over a wide range of incompatible outcomes, for example, is punished relative to more discerning theories. Such wasteful theories include what are known in probability theory as non-informative theories. A theory is non-informative with respect to a set of outcomes/statements if it gives us no reason to expect any particular member of the set. For finite sets, non-informative theories can justify the use of the principle of indifference, whereby we assign equal probabilities to each member of the set. For infinite sets, non-informative distributions have been derived for specific cases and include flat distributions, the Jeffreys distribution, maximum entropy, and more. It is an open question whether there are general principles that govern all non-informative distributions. Note well that non-informative theories do not automatically have low posterior probabilities. For example, the theory, Alice shuffled the deck of cards thoroughly, is non-informative with regard to the order of the deck, but is not thereby necessarily implausible. So, I will tell you, I do not completely understand everything here. I've tried to explain it to the best of my understanding. If someone wants to talk about this in a little bit more detail, methodical detail, who actually does have some qualification in the field, I would welcome you coming on my show. I'm afraid that, if you're not informed on this and not qualified, there are probably other shows you can speak on. I want to have people that will take this seriously and also understand the math, and we can walk through it, because I've just said I don't completely understand this, but I'm offering my intuition. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone who's joined us today on this segment on Nerds Go Clubbing. So in the next segment on this topic, we'll keep slugging through the paper. We're through about 10% of the paper. This is going to be a lot of segments. So thank you very much all who've joined us. Take care. God bless you.